Welcome to the Inside Track on Real Estate. I'm Yetta Dekker, and today I'm here with Ian McLean. Hi, Ian.
Good morning, Yetta.
Good morning. And we are going to talk about the legal ease of a buy and or a sell, or even investing in real estate. I guess it applies to everything, or even leasing, right? Because you're a lawyer.
Yes, and we've done it all, really. I've done it all with you and your office. Yeah. We've bought, my wife and Rosalind and myself, with you.
Yeah.
We've sold with you.
Yeah.
We've leased with you.
Right.
We haven't invested with you yet.
You're going to do that next.
Probably.
Yeah.
Other people are always talking investment in real estate, and we get that a lot.
Yeah.
People are wondering about, for example, should they invest in condos?
Right.
My son lives in Toronto now, and he's trying to save up some money to put down on a condo, and he keeps asking me, is that a good idea?
Right.
I can't comment, because I would tell him, go see a real estate agent for what?
And we'll get him a great one in Toronto. So that's a little tiny sidebar that I don't think we're going to talk about today. It's an important thing for our clients to know, though. If you are looking anywhere in the world, actually, for real estate counsel, we actually have an amazing network of realtors that we've established over the last 25 years. And even if we're in a city, or you're wanting to move to a city or a town where we may not have an established relationship, which there's a few, not that many, then we have a pretty awesome method of discovering who the best are in the city and doing an interview process so that we connect you with somebody that's actually going to take care of you.
Well, you have a remarkable organization.
Yeah.
I had the chance to speak to somewhat over 100 real estate agents not that long ago.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is you're constantly updating them.
Yeah.
And they were constantly being told basically really good information about how to develop their organizations, how to develop their businesses, and how to give that type of extra benefit service that every client's looking for.
Yeah.
And when Rosalind and I were buying a house in Ottawa, again, I've told you this, and I've shared it on other programs that we've done, we didn't know the market.
Right.
So we came to the agent, and we were relying on the agent to help us with the market.
Right.
Where did we want to be? What was the cost going to be? Was that reasonable?
Right.
Was that what the market should sustain? And was it a good investment, really?
Right.
To use the other thing for us.
Yeah.
And then we had to get into the legal.
Right, and that's what we're talking about today is the legal. How did we get sidetracked on real estate? We went off on another piggy trail. You know that that's what we do on this show often. We go down piggy trails, and we don't do bunny trails, because we're all about piggy banks and putting money in piggy banks. And so if you want some information on investing in real estate, actually, the wealth formula that Ken wrote last year is certainly available and has some good basics in there as well. And they run monthly workshops on all kinds of facets. And in fact, your legal firm comes to some of our workshops on buying real estate and investing in real estate, so that there is that expertise that's actually connected as well, which is really awesome. So back to real estate. We had promised each other, real estate law, we had promised each other that we would start with a controversial topic. Didn't we?
Yes.
Yes.
And that makes perfect sense, because nobody wants to be involved in controversial topics, especially when they're buying a house or selling a house. The last thing you want is to visit me on my litigation practice.
Right, because he does that too.
You want to see me strictly for the real estate side of my practice.
Right.
And I'm hoping at all times to fulfill that side of it to the best of my abilities.
And then we don't have to deal with the litigation, exactly.
But too often people have come to me with all sorts of problems that have come about as a result of real estate agents.
Right.
And many, many, many of those problems arise from the vendor disclosure.
Yeah, and it's called the Seller Property Information Statement. We short form it SPIS, and that shame on us for short forming everything, because what on earth does that actually mean to the average buyer or seller? However, even in the agreements, it's often stated as Seller Property Information Statement, and then in brackets SPIS. And this is a form that has gone through ups and downs over the last 15 plus years. It didn't used to exist at all back when I started in the industry in '89. There was no such a thing as a vendor disclosure or seller disclosure. It was simply buyer beware, really.
It was. That was the traditional standpoint.
Yeah.
You bought the house, it's called caveat emptor, the old Latin phrase, and that's exactly what it means. Buyer beware. As soon as the deal closed, everything merged on closing, you got what you bought. And then you'd go in the next day and find out that the basement leaked.
Right.
And you hadn't been told about that.
And you didn't notice it in your building inspection because it's well camouflaged, or whatever the case may be. Or maybe it didn't leak and it does now.
And there was load-bearing walls that had been removed.
Right. Hopefully a building inspection would have caught that, but really even back in the 80s, building inspections were really just becoming the norm.
That was just starting.
Yeah.
I think we had our first one in the mid-'80s sometime,
Yeah.
and we had to look to find someone, and this was in Toronto.
And
there weren't many of them around.
Absolutely. I know when I started in the industry, and I shouldn't admit this probably out loud on air, but I will because I don't mind people knowing the learning curve that I've gone through. When I first started in the industry, I didn't know that it was a good idea for me as a realtor to be at the inspection.
Oh,
So
yes.
I booked an inspection, sent the inspector, sent the client, and have a party. And then later to discover that really how could I protect my client if I wasn't there as a resource for them and for the inspector. I only did that once and then I learned, but seriously, it was such a new novelty to have an inspection.
Well, this is going to come as a shock to you maybe, but many real estate agents still don't go with the inspectors.
Oh, well.
And I've seen that because that's one of the questions I ask. When people come in and they say, well, for example, we've got a leaking roof. And the home inspection didn't show that. Well, number one, there's an action against a home inspection, the home inspector, but we won't go into that subject right at the moment.
No.
But what should they have seen? Well, I always ask, was your agent there? And you'd be surprised how often the answer to that is no.
Well.
I paid for the inspector showed up, and this is the report I got. Now, that's a home inspection. But the vendor disclosure, the agent should be a part of that. If you're acting for the vendor, I would insist, if I have any input at all, that the realtor sit down with that vendor and complete that because it's a potential minefield.
It is. And these disclosure forms, like we were chatting about a few minutes ago, have really gone through popularity and then not again and sort of all over the place. And I think the bottom line is, from a seller's perspective, it'd be nice not to fill it out, because what if you answer something wrong? Except from a buyer's perspective, if you didn't get one or you were told you couldn't have one, it's what is the seller hiding?
That is the instant red flag.
Yeah.
When you see the agreement of purchase and sale coming in, where's the vendor disclosure? Has that been filled out? Let's see it. Because if there's any problems with it, let's do it now.
Yeah.
And the first thing I ask the client is this what you filled out if they're the vendor? And then the ultimate question, and I don't mind asking the question, is it true?
Right.
Because too often you get so many shades of gray, you can finesse
Right.
the answers to that. Does your roof leak? Well, no. Has your roof leaked? Well, yeah, it did a year ago, but we haven't seen it in the last year. Well, that's because we haven't had a particularly heavy rainfall in the last year.
Right.
So really, your answer should be yes.
Right.
Not frequently, maybe. You might want to qualify it, but if you don't say it, the next thing that happens, the buyer's in there and the buyer says, now I have an action against you because of this negligent misrepresentation, as it's called.
Right.
Because you didn't tell and you knew.
Right.
Because the new buyer goes in, gets a home inspector to have a look at that. The home inspector says that should have been obvious to anybody. The neighbors are often the best. Goes to the neighbor and says, well, that person had 3 new roofs in the last year. You'd be surprised how often neighbors' statements come into this thing, which display the fact that there's errors and they've been deliberate in the vendor disclosure, and that leads to litigation, and that's the last thing somebody wants. After you've sold your house, you're gone, now you're being sued over your old house. Don't get in that situation. And you as a real estate agent, tell them, be honest, be forthright, and go to the side of too much disclosure.
Too much is better than not enough. Even when we're filling out a form, it's has the roof ever leaked? Well, yes, and since then we've replaced the shingles. Perfect. Just put that down. Prior to the shingle replacement, there was roof leakage. It was over the master bedroom. We replaced some insulation, or it was minor and we didn't need to, or whatever the case may be. Provide the information that's available, that you have knowledge of, and it's previous to you. A lot of times where we run into snags is where the property potentially had leakage prior to the current homeowner living in the house, and yet the ceiling hasn't been painted, so there's evidence it was a leak, then really the best thing to say is not during my occupancy. However, we did note at our building inspection, or when we purchased, that there was roof or ceiling marking or water marking on the ceiling, has not caused us any grief, and we've done nothing about it.
Yeah. Again, the truth is the only defense in these things, and be liberal with the truth. If you know of a problem, if you know of a potential problem, if you know of a problem that you didn't deal with because you didn't have the budget to do it, tell them. It may cost you $1,000. There may be a lower offer that comes in. It may cost you a couple $1,000 to be fully truthful, but it will save you in the long run.
Right.
And the last thing is, again, to repeat myself, you want is, having left the house, being involved in 3 years of litigation about that house you've left behind because you didn't come forth with all the information, or all the information that you could have come forth with. Because some other lawyer on some other side is going to not be so kind with you. And they're going to take you to task and say, well, you should have known, or you ought to have known, or it was reasonable expectation that this problem existed, and now we'll take a shot at you.
Right.
And then you're responsible for the costs of that, plus potentially the costs of the repair that you didn't do because you didn't think you needed to do it.
Right.
So be liberal with the truth, be straightforward, come out with it all, and cover yourself. And your agent can be of great assistance in that.
Yeah, we will often encourage our clients, because we're not allowed to fill out the form, and in fact they improved the form a few years ago when no longer is it a check mark or an X in the correct box, it's actually the initial.
You have to see the initials now.
The initial of the seller. It doesn't have to be both sellers, but one or the other needs to initial in the appropriate box. And yet some of the questions are a little bit confusing. Does any other party have first right of refusal or ownership of the property? I don't know. I mean, as a average person that has owned a couple of properties, how do you answer that question? Well, the answer is, unless there's somebody that's not on title that has ownership, like a spouse potentially, that you were not married to when you purchased the property, so it was only registered in your name, and now you have a spouse, the answer to that question would be, yes, there is, and it's my spouse. And that the reason you would disclose that is because then on the agreement of purchase and sale, although their name wouldn't be on the top line stating that they own it, they would have to sign off to allow you to sell it if it was a home you lived in. A matrimonial home. So there's little questions like that that sound really innocent enough. Or the other one is there any drainage restrictions? Well, I pretty much don't know of a property in the city of Ottawa or outskirts that doesn't have drainage restrictions, because they're city imposed or municipality imposed. So to say no to that is really potentially putting you at risk. You're better to say yes, and you're saying you would maybe state then city and municipality imposed or typical drainage restrictions, nothing like a major ditch running through your property or something, because you want to make more note of that. So just being engaged with your realtor to fill it out correctly.
Well, we had some fun with ours. You may remember we were selling a condo.
Yeah.
That gets even more interesting, because your real estate agent's sitting with you, and here's your lawyer of 35 years experience trying to figure out, well, wait a second, do I answer that question in relation to what the condos could potentially impose, or what we've seen ourselves? Because with a condominium, of course, some of the issues revolve around common units.
Right.
Whose responsibility is it to repair that? Is it the individual house owners or the unit owner, or is it the condominium corporation?
Right.
And here you are filling it out. So what you do again in that case is you go liberal. Yes, we've had an issue here. This may be solved by the condominium corporation. It may be their responsibility, but we're telling you about it anyway, in case it's not the condominium's
Well, or even
responsibility.
if it becomes something where there's a special assessment.
Oh, special assessments are a whole other issue. Should we talk about vulnerabilities in relation to special assessments?
No. Well, maybe. Maybe
Okay.
we will touch on it. Maybe we might make this entire show controversial. Anyway,
Well,
so
that would
far
be
so good.
That would be right up there.
It would be. So if you're just joining us now on the Inside Track on Real Estate, I am chatting with Ian McLean, and we're talking from a legal perspective. He's a real estate lawyer in Ottawa, available to connect with you through us, or actually, what's your contact information, Ian?
Well, I'm at 816 Bank Street now,
Yeah.
which is right in the glebe that
Yeah.
you helped me get.
Yeah.
Wonderful space there. We're have the north wing of the 4th Avenue Baptist Church, which used to be a nursery school, but we've taken it over and renovated it, and we're now in there with a lovely little courtyard in front of us. We're the only garden on Bank Street, I think.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
Will be shortly. So you can connect with us there. The phone number there is 613-695-6774, or you can look us up on the net at McLean's Lawyers.
Yeah, and McLean is spelled?
McLean. So McLean's, it's McLeans, Lawyers, Lawyers, both plural.com.
There you go. And even if you did, we've been talking about SPISs or seller property information statements in the first half of the show. And so it is something that everybody is up in arms about. If you go on the internet and you Google seller property information statement, you will get controversy, and then some more controversy. It's kind of like the three most important things in real estate: location, location, location. When it comes to seller property information statements, it's just controversy, controversy, controversy. And so even if you don't fill one out, though, you can still be liable for withholding information.
Oh, yes.
So it's not like they are the enemy, really. As long as you disclose adequately, they're actually a good thing because they'll reduce your liability.
That's what they're meant to do.
Yeah.
They're meant to have everything on the open so that you have an informed buyer and an informed seller.
Yeah.
And you know when they meet in the middle, that's called a market. And you get a fair market value from informed buyers and informed sellers.
Yeah, and that's the point of the seller property information statement.
It is, and it's very beneficial. Again, if you're buying, you absolutely insist on seeing it. And if you're selling, you insist on filling it out so you avoid the potential liability of somebody coming back saying, we weren't aware of this. Oh, yes, you were. It was in the vendor disclosure, and here's how we filled it out.
Yeah, so it's filling it out correctly and accurately and meticulously that becomes the real concern.
Absolutely. Again, the truth is key.
Yeah.
Don't trifle with the truth.
Yeah, truth will set you free.
We haven't got into the whole scripture on that, but we'll take the final words and we'll leave it at that.
Exactly. So the other controversial topic that we thought we might touch on is special assessments.
Yes. Special assessments come up if you're involved with condominiums.
Yeah.
And every person who's a part of a condominium hates the assessment that comes with the condominium. When we were in our condominium that you sold for us,
yeah,
we didn't like the fact that not only had we bought a house, but we bought a portion of a corporation. And that corporation insisted on maintenance, and it was all good. They did a good job of it. But every owner never appreciates the assessments that come because it seems to add to your mortgage and your carrying costs and everything else. But then what happens is, at some point, your condominium will deteriorate. Your things will, over time, depreciate, and you have to renew that. So what you have is a whole common units that have to be replaced. And if it hasn't been factored in, you can get what's called a special assessment.
right.
The one I always refer to is one that happened in a very prominent area of Ottawa that had an underground garage. Well, what happened is over time, the salt and whatever over the winters led to the situation where that underground garage needed to be replaced at a cost of a special assessment of $40,000 per unit. Now, you're the owner of a unit there, and you've paid your mortgage, and you're just doing fine, and but you're just making ends
And you've been
meet.
paying your condo fees.
Absolutely, and you're in
Yeah.
fine shape, and all of a sudden, you get a letter from the condominium corporation that says, oh, by the way, we're going to have to completely redo this underground garage, and as a result of it, the 20 owners are each going to have to pay a special assessment of $40,000. Would you please write your check and make it payable to us in the next 10 days? There's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't increase the value of your unit. If your unit was worth X dollars before, it's still worth X dollars after you've put your $40,000. If you don't put your $40,000, of course your unit's going to be worth an awful lot less.
Right.
Because who's going to buy that unit from you when they can get one equivalent on the next block without the special assessment?
Right.
Without taking off $40,000 from the price that you're going to get.
Right.
So these things are not really predictable,
No.
but they're a source of great controversy because people then go back to the individual unit and call the condo meeting and start complaining. Can we get this done cheaper? Why weren't we told about this? And the simple fact is you're part of a corporation, it's a corporate expense, and you're stuck with it.
Right.
So I don't think the bottom line is never buy an underground garage unit.
No, it's
but
not.
You really can't know what this is going to happen, when it's going to happen, or how much it's going to cost you. But anybody going into real estate, into the condominium market, has to be aware, and we tell our clients this, you look at the status certificate, as it's called.
Yeah.
You get that when you're acting for a purchaser. You look to make sure there's some contingencies in there. And you look under, is there any litigation involving the corporation? That's one, because every unit owner could be responsible for a portion of a judgment. And then you look for, are there any anticipated special assessments? Or the other thing is, how long has this place been up?
Right.
What kind of depreciation is going on? When have they planned to replace units? And how's that been assessed? And will it be the subject of a special assessment?
Right.
And that's what you try to prophetically look forward to into the future and say to your prospective purchaser, you may be on the hook for this. Maybe you don't want this particular condo corporation. Maybe you should look at the one in the next block, which has a different status certificate and doesn't have the potential of a special assessment in the next year or two.
Right. So you're looking at the potential likelihood of a special assessment, and they will show up several years before they're actually assessed.
Yes.
Right, because there's constant studies that are being done by the condo corp because they have certain ramifications, or there's certain particular guidelines, that's the right word, that they have to operate under. And so they can't just arbitrarily throw out a special assessment. It really does have to be planned for, and often they will be set so that you pay a certain amount over a certain number of years. You can often finance it. Just the other day in Ottawa, in the last few weeks, there has been a building that now has a $50,000 special assessment levied against each homeowner. That's pretty extreme. Most of the time when we hear about them, it's $5,000, $10,000 in that neighborhood. It just depends on the magnitude of the surprise.
That's the operative word, is surprise. For example, nobody would have known that suddenly in a heavily liquid winter, that so much water would have come into that underground garage that it basically undercut the whole structural integrity of the organization. Prematurely failed.
Yeah.
So instead of the normal depreciation, which basically is factored into the condominium expectation,
it's there.
Suddenly you had a potential disaster that the whole garage could have collapsed. What can you do? There's nothing the corporation could do except call a special meeting, tell the unhappy owners of the condominium units that, guess what, we have to do this.
Right.
Or number one, we're potentially facing an Elliott Lake situation, or we're just going to have to close down that garage, and you're going to have to park somewhere else. But when the structural integrity of the place is at risk, you can't do anything about it.
No, you have to take care of it.
You have to.
So we've been talking about controversial legal things today in relation to buying or selling real estate, and there's lots of it that's very typical and very routine, where there's not much much challenge. And we have done a previous show on that. So if you want to look at sort of the ins and outs of a typical real estate transaction from a lawyer's perspective, do go back and look at that, because that will also be interesting from a day-to-day process.
Yeah, we did that in the past, where we looked at more or less a typical transaction.
Yeah.
There's no such thing.
Well,
in my 35 years, I've never seen one that went exactly the way it was supposed to. There's always a twist here or there, always an unexpected thing that arises. For example, when we sold our house up in North Bay, some years ago, about 6 weeks ago, we got a bill for electric. Well, what happened is the hydro hadn't been changed over. We'd changed it over, but there's been a mistake made in the hydro, and we're getting bills from a year ago, and we haven't been in that house for over a year.
Yeah.
Now, it's a simple letter saying,
except it's a nuisance.
It's a nuisance.
It's a nuisance. So those things even happen to us that are in the profession, even when we know we've taken care of our own things. And when I just sold a property and bought one recently, we had delays on our financing. And and you could blame this person or that person, or this fell through or that fell through. And reality is nobody really did anything wrong. And yet it still created a week delay in getting a property closed.
Completely unforeseen, but these things happen, and we have to be able to adjust. And I guess that's part of the professionalism, really.
Yeah.
You have to be able to make the appropriate amendments,
Yeah.
bring the appropriate parties into line, make sure things are brought back to where they should be, and to bring it back to restore it to as close a standard as it ever gets.
Exactly. And so even for us, we run into snags on our own properties. And I think that was reassuring to me almost, because when you see it happen for someone else, it's really heartbreaking. And then you have the experience yourself and you go, okay, so that's what somebody's experiencing. And it just brings the humanness back into it so quickly.
We bought our house in North Bay. We showed up from Toronto, having moved there. We walked in the door on the day of closing, and there's workmen in there tearing apart the chimney. They'd found something was wrong with the chimney, and we hadn't been told. There's people in there we had a choice. We could call the deal off and move back to Toronto, or we could live in a construction zone, which we had to for the next 2 weeks. And now, granted, there was an abatement of the purchase price.
Yeah, of course.
There, but it certainly was upsetting and disorienting, shall we say, to be moving into your dream house, and there it is. You moved into a construction zone.
So we will attempt to avoid all those kinds of things and just know that it still potentially could happen. So if you're just joining us on the Inside Track, I just want to make sure you get told about a great property that's located in Barrhaven. It is only $325,000 for a single family home that's actually got 3 bedrooms upstairs, a 4th bedroom in the lower level, and a total of 4 bathrooms. Kind of a deal.
Sounds like it.
It is, and it's well maintained. It's got a nice modern kitchen, nice modern lower level in the basement family room. It's not paneling. Nothing wrong with paneling, however, it does cause it to feel a little dated these days. So beautifully drywalled lower level with a bathroom, bedroom, as well as a family room area. So lots to offer, hedged private backyard, easy access, bus route, almost like just a couple of minutes away. So easy right downtown in less than 40 minutes. Door to door.
Sounds like a good deal.
It is.
They'll need a lawyer.
They will. So if you are interested in that property or need a lawyer to help you with that property and a realtor, you know how to reach us at 613-860-4663. And we have lots of other properties. If that one sells before you know it, which I think it might, we have lots of others always coming up and can help you with not only the properties we have listed, the properties that are listed throughout the entire MLS, and often even the ones that are listed exclusively with our real estate counterparts, because we're in contact with them so frequently to know what's going on. So if you'd like more information, or you want to be on the show, or you have a question for the show, or you have a question for Ian, you can connect with us at DekkerTeam.com or McLeanslawyers.com. Perfect. Thanks for joining us on the Inside Track today, and thank you, Ian, once again.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, we're going to have Ian back again because he's such a great guest and has so much valuable information and is willing to go down controversial roads with me. So, thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Okay.
It's a pleasure.
We'll talk to you again soon on the Inside Track on Real Estate. Bye for now.